A man in Indiana tried to spring himself from his own criminal case by forging Chief Justice John Roberts' signature onto a fake Supreme Court dismissal order, complete with a counterfeit seal, and then, apparently warming up, moved on to impersonating a National Security Agency agent to request welfare checks on the sheriff's office investigating him. I am Lambert Woollingham, and this is the Daily Shear for Thursday, August 27th. My coffee has gone cold twice already, which either means today's news is unusually dense, or my mug has structural problems nobody has addressed. Closer to home, the paperwork is thicker than the smoke, and in North Texas, that is saying something. Travis County has joined a growing multi-state lawsuit fighting new federal rules on mail-in ballots, and this one has been building for a while. The Postal Service's newly finalized regulation, ordered by the Trump administration to verify voter citizenship, requires federal eligible voter lists to be compiled before any ballot can be delivered. County officials warn the mandate will cause severe delays and added costs just 70 days before the midterms. On top of backlogs, the state's own election software is already producing on its own. Travis County is now suing alongside the League of United Latin American Citizens, Painting Center, the Campaign Legal Center, the City of Madison, Wisconsin, and 25 state attorneys general, all asking a court for a temporary restraining order before the first ballots go out. Officials say the rule risks disenfranchising military, disabled, and elderly voters whose registration status will not sync in time, a curious way to secure an election by removing people from it. The Woodlands Township Board voted unanimously, 7-0, to pay Houston $50 million by 2030 in exchange for permanently taking annexation off the table. The deal ends a 2007 arrangement that funneled a share of the township's sales tax revenue to Houston indefinitely, though the Woodlands still remains inside Houston's extraterritorial jurisdiction regardless. Houston's own city council, notably, did not match that enthusiasm and delayed its vote on the matter by a week. Township officials described the $50 million payment as a shrewd, long-term investment in local control and pointed to Houston's own budget troubles as the real motivation behind renegotiating the terms. The agreement takes effect the moment Houston gets around to approving it. Federal investigators searched an apartment near University of Texas Health Houston and seized computers and external drives in a trade secret theft investigation tied to MD Anderson Cancer Center. Court filings allege an instructor on administrative leave was granted a limited USB exception to use a personal medical device and within hours transferred more than 3 terabytes of biomedical research data onto a personal hard drive. The download reportedly included genomic data, experiment files, manuscripts, and material tied to federal research grants. The instructor and their spouse, both employed in MD Anderson's molecular oncology and experimental radiation oncology departments, were already under internal investigation for allegedly running a home-based freight forwarding business dealing in counterfeit goods, a side venture that may also violate the terms of their H-1B visas. Investigators are now combing through the seized hardware for whatever else turns up. Governor Greg Abbott has ordered the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to build a statewide framework for 3-year bachelor's degrees aimed at getting graduates into the workforce faster and cheaper. The mandate creates a working group of university officials, faculty, and employers tasked with identifying high-demand jobs suited to a condensed academic track, with recommendations due by December 31st. Nothing changes immediately, and no institution has to adopt anything yet, but Abbott's office plans to use the findings to push for formal legislation next session. State officials say achieving the shorter timeline will require standardizing degrees around 90 credit hours and trimming general education requirements across public universities. The Ross Fire has burned at least 80,000 acres across Palo Pinto and Jack counties, and containment sits at just 12%. The fire ignited Monday near United States 180 and spread fast, pushed by high winds, dry vegetation, and a prolonged lack of rain, forcing school closures and mandatory evacuations along County Road 2210 toward US 281. More than 100 firefighters, backed by bulldozers and aircraft, are working the line, and an emergency shelter has opened at the Twin Lake Recreation Center in Jacksboro. The fire has also gutted Worth Ranch, a Scouting America camp that has operated since 1929, leaving much of the property blackened and several buildings destroyed beyond repair. Crews say they are now focused entirely on protecting structures, since containment itself is losing to the weather. On the economic side, $18 billion changed hands before lunch, though not 1 cent of it will make phones less addictive on its own. Meta has agreed to pay up to $18 billion to settle a sweeping multi-state lawsuit accusing the company of designing Facebook and Instagram to addict teenagers, a case that has been grinding toward trial for a while now. The deal halts a federal trial in California and forces Meta to build in hard limits, a default 2-hour daily cap for minors and a shutoff of notifications between midnight and 6 a.m. The money will be paid out over 10 years, with California collecting at least $1.5 billion and Texas getting roughly $1 billion for youth mental health services. Meta also has to hide like counts by default for younger users and restrict filters that alter kids' appearances. The settlement lets Meta avoid a jury verdict and keep its Section 230 protections intact, though it does require an overhaul of age verification, an area the platform has never been particularly good at running. A $3.6 billion data center project in rural Rapides Parish, Louisiana, is facing a backlash after residents discovered local officials negotiated the whole thing under non-disclosure agreements. The Development Board and state economic agencies signed those NDAs under the codename Project Lightning, quietly acquiring 300 acres of former farmland near the town of Boyce. Bulldozers and construction equipment showed up before residents were told anything about the facility's power and water demands, a sequencing choice that keeps happening with hyperscale data centers lately. Locals are now protesting that the secrecy locked them out of zoning and environmental review entirely. The fight is becoming a familiar shape as AI infrastructure gets fast-tracked through small towns that find out about it after the concrete is poured. NVIDIA has reportedly agreed to buy the open-source AI hub Hugging Face for $12.9 billion, merging the industry's dominant chipmaker with the platform developers actually used to build things. Hugging Face hosts hundreds of thousands of open-source models, datasets, and applications that much of the current AI boom runs on. The deal would let NVIDIA weld its hardware directly to that software pipeline, tightening its grip against rival chip designers. Analysts see it as a play for more cloud revenue and control over AI's foundational infrastructure. Regulators are expected to take a hard look, given their track record of getting nervous when hardware giants start buying up the software layers everyone else depends on. Amazon has quietly raised prices across its hardware lineup, with Kindles, Fire TV sticks, Echo speakers, and Eero routers going up by as much as 60%. That is a sharp break from a decade-long strategy of selling those devices or near cost just to get people locked into Amazon's retail and subscription ecosystem. The hardware division has been under pressure to prove it can turn a profit on its own, especially after years of investment in Alexa's voice assistant, never generated the e-commerce payoff Amazon was banking on. The timing lines up with the company's plan to roll out a paid generative AI version of Alexa. The era of the artificially cheap smart speaker, subsidized by your Prime membership, appears to be over. The Fed's preferred inflation gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, rose 0.2% in July, holding the annual rate at 3.35% for a second straight month. Overall spending was flat, but core services, which make up more than 60% of what people spend money on, hit their worst readings since early 2025. Food prices ticked up to 2.4% annual growth, and energy remains 15% higher than a year ago. The report also flagged new pressure trickling down from corporate AI infrastructure spending, which is starting to show up in consumer tech and utility bills. I will note, calmly, that a central bank spending years pinning rates near zero and then acting surprised when prices refuse to behave is not exactly a plot twist, and the stubborn core numbers now complicate whatever timeline the Fed had in mind for cuts this fall. Away from the balance sheets, today's headlines ran toward impersonation in one form or another. A man has been arrested on federal charges after allegedly forging Chief Justice John Roberts' signature and a counterfeit Supreme Court seal onto a fake dismissal order in an attempt to clear his own criminal case in Indiana. Joshua M. Culver, who also went by the alias Maverick A. Young, filed the fabricated order in Grant County Superior Court last September. Prosecutors say the fake Supreme Court paperwork was just one piece of a wider impersonation campaign, since Culver also posed as an NSA agent, calling the Tippecanoe County Sheriff's Office to demand welfare checks and internal employee records while threatening the department with unspecified administrative consequences. He was arrested in Colorado after a federal grand jury indicted him on 4 counts of impersonating a federal officer and 1 count of using a forged judge's signature. It is, at minimum, an ambitious way to handle a local court date. A state-sponsored Chinese hacking operation breached networks at NASA, the Federal Reserve, the United States Senate, and the Justice Department before federal authorities managed to seize the group's web domains. The Justice Department and Federal Bureau of Investigation say the operation also compromised 3 Department of Energy national laboratories and hospital systems worldwide, and had been running since 2018. The hackers reportedly used a global botnet of hijacked household devices to disguise their traffic, then sold their network penetration tools to China's Ministry of State Security and the People's Liberation Army through a front company in Nanjing. Seizing the domains cut off the malware's communication lines. Officials still have not said what classified material, if any, got out during those 7 years. A California judge has suspended criminal proceedings against an armed former Marine arrested at President Trump's Los Angeles area golf course, sending him instead to mental health court after ruling him unfit to stand trial. Janine John Tale was detained in early August wearing an earpiece, photographing the property, and allegedly tracking security preparations ahead of a Republican National Committee dinner. A search of his vehicle turned up a loaded 9mm pistol, hollow point ammunition, binoculars, and a fake security badge, along with over 200 pages of handwritten notes on survivalist tactics, Secret Service schedules, and the movements of former First Lady Melania Trump. During evaluation, Talley reportedly insisted he had spent 14 years as a senior State Department official, a claim doctors did not find persuasive. The case now proceeds under a mental health track rather than a criminal one. The Food and Drug Administration has approved a new targeted therapy for pancreatic cancer that works by blocking a protein tumor's need to grow, effectively starving them. The drug targets a genetic mutation present in most pancreatic cancers, a disease that has historically shrugged off standard chemotherapy and radiation. In clinical trials, patients on the new treatment survived nearly twice as long as those on standard care, and the targeted approach spared healthy tissue well enough to reduce the side effects that usually drive patients to quit treatment altogether. Oncologists expect the approval to open the door to similar protein-blocking therapies for lung, colon, and other solid tumors. For a cancer this stubborn, doubling survival time counts as a result worth stating plainly. A federal judge has denied Minnesota's request to immediately extradite an immigration and customs enforcement officer held in Texas, a case that has been tangled in a jurisdictional standoff for a while now, clearing the way for his release from custody. Christian Castro faces felony assault charges and accusations of filing a false police report in Minnesota over the January shooting of 24-year-old Julio Cesar Sosa Celis. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison sued Texas Governor Greg Abbott to force the transfer, citing recorded jailhouse calls in which Castro allegedly discussed marrying a woman in Mexico, buying a house, and leaving the country the moment he made bail. The judge's ruling lets him post bond locally anyway, while the extradition fight over the warrant grinds on in federal court. Ellison's flight risk warning is, for now, just something for the record. The detail I cannot get past today is the MD Anderson case, specifically the part where the instructor was granted a limited USB exception for a personal medical device. I would like to know what medical device requires 3 terabytes of throughput, because if it is a pacemaker, we have bigger problems than research theft, given that this particular pacemaker apparently also backs up your genome, your grant paperwork, and possibly your counterfeit goods inventory. Give me a hospital-grade USB exception, and I will personally smuggle out the entire building directory, alphabetized, before lunch. Somewhere in Houston, there is now a hard drive holding more biomedical data than most small countries, and its owner's other pending legal problem is imported knockoff handbags. I do not know which regulatory body handles that particular combination, but I hope they enjoy the paperwork. Note that the going rate for a Supreme Court seal these days is apparently 1 federal indictment and a change of address in Colorado. That is the full ledger for today, and I am returning my highlighter to the drawer before it starts making unauthorized commentary of its own. Lambert Woollingham, done for now. The day has been shorn. Until tomorrow.